You mentioned some of the creative leaders you work with.
Yes.
Brilliant in long-term brand building.
Well, they've got to have the strategic chops. They've got to have the creative chops. They've got to have deep, I think, cultural sensitivities or knowledge. And the reason I say that's still important is you get a deep understanding, and the world is changing.
It is said that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. In a marketing world obsessed with the next big thing, we often suffer from collective amnesia. To understand where the frontier is moving, you have to talk to the person who, as much as anyone, has drawn the map of the last 50 years. So Martin Sorrell didn't just witness the globalization of the 80s or the digital revolution of the 2000s, he built the structures that defined them. And now he's doing it again in the age of AI. I'm Josh Spanier, VP of AI and Marketing Strategy at Google, and this is Frontier CMO. Today, Sir Martin shares why the CFO is finally driving AI adoption and why creativity is entering a new golden age. One note, Sir Martin's agency, Monks, works with Google Marketing. Here is my conversation with Sir Martin Sorrell. One thing I wanted to ask you about this, and this is kind of fun, it is related to the IPG Omnicom merger. We don't need to talk about the actual merger, but I was reading an article and you said of the merger, it's like two drunks leaning against a lamppost, propping each other up. Now, your reputation is as a financial architect, a business leader and architect. That is an incredibly evocative turn of phrase. And what I'm wondering is, did you make that up on the fly, or did you have that in your back pocket and you just whipped it out ready?
I was talking to a journalist, and actually what I said was, when the chill winds blow, people huddle together.
Right.
And I said, or you could say it's two drunks leaning up against the lamppost. So it was those two things, actually. They did print the first one, but they thought the second one was more evocative, if that's the right word for it.
I like it. Now, do you have others? Because is there any way I can get something equally brilliant out of you today? Because I think that would be a fun thing to find.
Oh, well, we'll see. Let's see how we go.
I was just doing my research for this conversation, and I was trying to work out when we first met. And it turns out it was 1978.
Really?
I have known you my whole life. Yeah, so that's just a funny, I don't know if I have a longer relationship with anyone in advertising than you. So one of the things I was thinking about, and look, like it or not, you are a living legend. When the book on history is written, you are in it.
In a living legend in my own mind or my mother's mind?
To the industry. There's a reason why we've invited you that's why we want your opinion and people want to hear it. It's fascinating to think about the personalities and you shuttling around London and the world, engaging with all these luminaries of the industry today. But what can CMOs learn from David Ogilvy, from the Saatchis brothers, from Trevor Beatty and all these characters and brilliant marketers that you've worked with over the decades?
This is a fundamental question. And the easy answer to your question is the power of marketing, the power of branding, the value it adds, the value creation around it, which at one level, I fear it's being lost. And at another level, to be blunt with you, I wonder whether times have changed. I mean, I really do, in my own mind, question whether the geographic changes that we're seeing at the moment, the fragmentation, and the technological changes that we've been going through probably since the new millennium with the internet, but it will precede that as well, I guess. But smartphones, AI, and then the gargantuan quantum computing changes that are coming down the pike. I was at Google Zeitgeist and you let us into, or Google took us round one of their quantum labs in Santa Barbara. And it's staggering to think about what's going to happen when quantum is finally implemented. Some people say it'll take 10 years, but in the near future. So maybe all those lessons that you referred to, whether it's David Ogilvy, John Hegarty, the Saatchis brothers, whoever, all those lessons around the power of marketing, the power of branding, the importance of long-term brand building with consumers, but not just with consumers, with your employees, with all the constituencies that you engage with in a business-to-business sense, or in a government sense, political sense, social sense, all that has become possibly less important. I continuously come across people who are rootless in a digital distributed world that can operate virtually from anywhere and everywhere, who, are not rooted to the spot as my generation was and my parents' generation was, and where value is created by coming up with ideas, building them, and then selling them. Because my dad said to me, find an industry that you enjoy, find a company in that industry that you enjoy. And if, your working life will be from 20 to 60 in his mind, and at that time, obviously it's different nowadays, but if at the age of 40, halfway through, once you've built a reputation, not a reputation where Josh Spanier invites you to a podcast, but a reputation where people think you know what you're doing, maybe mistakenly, but think you know what you're doing, then if you want to do something on your own, go off on your own, and when you're 40, go and do that. But my dad basically was talking about the value of long-term brand building, in this case, career brand building. The world is not long-term anymore. Average life of a CEO in a listed company where there's a separation between ownership and control, average life of a CEO might be 4 or 5 years. What I'm saying, Josh, is all the advice that those people would give us would be about the value of long-term brand building. And maybe right. The dynamics now are against that. And maybe the speed of technological change primarily, but also the fragmentation that we're seeing geographically, results in a totally different way of thinking about brand building.
So who's doing that thinking as you see it? CMOs doing it? Are consultancies doing it? If there is a new paradigm, who's building it?
It's a really interesting question. And it's something that I've been wrestling with for the last year or so. Look at what's going on. I look at the S&P 500. I listen to a call, a Goldman trading call every week. They record it on a Friday, and they pull in all their people from all over the world, from China, from America, from Europe, and they talk about the economy. Now, one of the guys follows the S&P 500 earnings results. Q3 earnings were up, EPS was up 12%, helped by a weak dollar to some extent. But even if you exclude the hyperscalers, including Alphabet, EPS was up 9%. Margins, all-time high. Capital as a proportion of GDP in the US, probably at an all-time high. Labor as a proportion of GDP, all-time low. So you've got companies doing very well. And I look at agencies, and they're not doing very well. Why is it that the agencies are not doing as well as I think they should be? Because the tightest correlation that I've ever seen in my 40, 50 years of trying to do something in the agency space is the correlation between corporate profitability and agency revenues. If profits are strong, agencies by and large do well. Well, that's not the case at the moment. So what the hell's happening?
I have a working theory. Can I run it by you?
Go ahead.
So I meet with a lot of chief marketing officers, a lot of marketers in my role, as do you. And what's clear to me is that on the client side, we are expecting transformation. We are expecting a new business model. We are expecting AI upending the way we do business. And most of the agencies are still built upon legacy ways of working and legacy models, and have not yet fully embraced, or if they are trying to, don't know how to even charge for these services. And the role of who does the work in this new landscape is very unclear. And I feel like customers, CMOs, are looking to the future, and agencies are built on quicksand at this point. So what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I'm not with you on that. So let me tell you why I'm not with it. For a couple of observations. Firstly, I think the reason that agencies are going backwards is that the advertising revenues last year, the total industry was $1 trillion. 700 billion of that was digital, of which Google is the largest. Alphabet's the largest part at 250, Meta 150, Amazon 60, TikTok 40. So that's growing at 10, 15, 20%. The other 300 billion, of which Warner Brothers Discovery is a part, and a particularly important part because it doesn't have as much live sport as the other one, so it's going backwards. That 300 billion is going backwards by 5 to 15%, depending on whether you have live sport or not. The problem for the agencies is they are rooted in that 300 billion. Even Publicis publicly says 25% of its revenues comes from traditional creative, which is under attack. So that's one observation I would make. So I think the fundamental reason is because the agencies, our agency holding companies, are still rooted in traditional, call it free-to-air network media, and that's why they're going backwards. Because if Publicis is 25%, WPP is probably 40%. The other thing in relation to what you just said is, I would agree with you, but clients aren't implementing AI at scale. And I'm a member of Data Digital Design Initiative at Harvard Business School, which is their AI sort of vertical run by Professor Karim Lakhani. And we've just been there's a committee, a number of us have been on a committee for a couple of years as they established the institute and the AI practice, if you like, at Harvard Business School. And they were saying that what they see from their research, and they're doing deep research in AI, what they're seeing is enterprise not adopt AI, but you and I and consumers adopt AI significantly. And I think the fundamental problem, and we'll get more into this, is that clients, you're right, they do want a transformational model, but they're not like Google. They're not in the center of the AI universe, and they're wrestling with the implications. And the only places that I've seen wholesale adoption of AI at scale, I'm not talking about tests and audits and workshops, but at scale, are two verticals: automobiles, where we've seen GM and BMW alter their model, BMW particularly in Europe, but GM globally, alter their model to adopt AI at scale. And you see the same thing in financial services. And in financial services, because of companies like Nubank, who we work for in Brazil, who are attacking the branch banking, traditional financial services business, that's an economic pressure that is forcing CMOs to look at their create costs and reduce their create costs as a proportion of media costs significantly as a result.
When I meet with customers in my role, I get three questions in very quick succession. The first question is, how are you in Google marketing transforming with AI? The second is, what lessons and learnings have you found to be successful that we can basically borrow, steal? And then the final question is, how do I get my teams to actually use AI technologies? I think there is a hunger. I think there is a desire for customers across categories to lean into the AI world. S4 was named AI Agency of the Year a couple of years ago in some fancy award you all won, but recognition of the progress you've made. Just give me your quick pitch on, I'm a CMO, I want to get the model of the future. How are you doing this with, say, General Motors, for Norm and them?
I don't think we are going to get wholesale adoption of AI at scale unless there is economic pressure to do so. We've talked to a cloud supplier about sending a questionnaire to clients about what are your create costs as a proportion of media costs? Our view being, both the cloud supplier and myself, that they should be about 10%. And we've got numerous examples, without naming names, of clients who are spending 15% of media costs, 20% of media costs on creative. And when we were talking about sending a survey to clients, we debated, should we send it to the CMO? And we said no. Should we send it to the CIO, the CTO? And we said no. Should we send it to the CFO? And we said yes. And when I recounted that at the D3 initiative just a couple of days ago, somebody at the table who's very financially orientated said, I totally agree. This is from a very big financial services company. I totally agree that the only time you will get traction is when the CFO, when you get engagement from the CFO to reduce costs. But I think it may happen, I'm not saying it will, that in 2026, the economic screw will tighten, and then you will get wholesale adoption. Growth is going to be more difficult to come by. So AI transformation becomes front and center. Two things you've got to do is you've got to vary where you operate. In other words, you've got to pick your geographies very carefully, or much more carefully than you used to be. And the second thing is technological change is going to drive you to be much more agile and responsive and proactive in your approach. In that world, slower growth, more inflation, higher interest rates, growth is going to become more difficult to come by. And what you have to do is to make sure that you're super efficient as well as operating in the right geographic areas.
I have a slightly contrarian view and a more positive one about marketers. And one of the things that I'm seeing in the conversations I have, both inside of Google and with people across the industry, is that there has been a turning of the wheel, and the fear of AI has receded, and the opportunity for creative brilliance, to use Nano Banana and Flow. Sure. And creatives are loving the capacity for AI to allow them to imagine the impossible. And it's kind of exciting. And one of the things that I'm seeing is every time inside of Google marketing, when we actually launch a AI first program and do something fun and inspiring, it actually lifts the whole floor or pushes the ceiling. And I'm hopeful that our industry is actually going to see the possibilities of better creativity, of more engagement with customers, and different formats and styles, short form video on YouTube Shorts and social shopping. And I actually think there's going to be a flourishing of creativity, and that's going to accelerate it. So I agree with you. The efficiency drive from CFOs is important. I kind of think that marketers are going to pull their socks up as well and embrace these technologies quicker than perhaps you're saying. I've worked with a number of incredibly inspiring individuals. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're being successful in the marketplace, that ability to inspire customers with what's possible. Could you just talk about the model for General Motors? I'm speaking with Norm in this podcast, and it's pretty fascinating.
You're absolutely right about the creative side, Nano Banana and it, whatever. I mean, I totally agree with that. But this is not about technological change. This is about change management. I think what you have to do is wholesale change. And that's what we've seen at GM.
Okay.
I mean, Norm is a highly analytical guy. And what his approach at GM has been to take the four brands, GMC, Buick, Chevrolet, Cadillac, and have an upper funnel strategic agency. In each case, and there are two Stagwell agencies, 72 and Sunny, and Anomaly, and then Mother and Preacher being a spin-off of people from Mother. And they're the upper funnel brand. And we are the foundational agency. Monks is the foundational agency that takes the big idea, creates, produces, and distributes the assets at scale and the personalization at scale. It may be easier with GM. They're the 19th largest advertiser in the world, the 11th in the US, so much more sort of US focused. We've seen it with BMW in Europe.
Let me just ask, what does at scale mean? Like, how many units of output of creative for Buick or Cadillac in any given month at this point?
You could talk about millions. You could talk about millions. I mean,
Okay.
with Netflix, I think when we did Narcos or Squid Games, we might be talking about sort of in theory, at least a million and a half assets potentially being used. Probably don't use more than 50 to 70,000, but with AI generated content, you can do it at even greater scale. So that where we're seeing, the answer to your question is where we're seeing AI traction, because of that, in my view, those economic pressures at scale, it's on visualization and copywriting, compressing the time taken and the cost of producing content. And then secondly, personalization at huge scale. You are now able to personalize communications through the digital platforms to consumers individually tailored to their, using the signals from the platforms and first-party data, individually tailoring it. The third area where we're beginning to see it, but it's slower in terms of adoption, is media planning and buying. My view is very, very sharply that you won't need 250,000 people or thereabouts in the media planning and buying industry. 70% of it already flows through your platforms and other digital platforms. And that analysis can be done purely algorithmically. The media planning and buying industry is still a manual industry, at least in part, if not in whole. And that 25-year-old media planner or buyer hasn't got the mental capacity, no matter how brilliant he or she is, to devise all the alternatives. It has to be done mathematically or by computers. So that industry, from an employment point of view, is going to shrink. The outputs, however, will be even more effective. And digital is 70% today. By 2030, probably be 85%. So huge concentration of digital media planning and buying with the platforms. And with the investment that you're making and the other hyperscalers are making, which next year will be 530 billion, this year probably 470 billion, so $500 billion each year being pumped into AI capacity and data capacity and compute capacity, that position is likely, in my view, to strengthen.
So let me bring this down a level.
Yes.
And it's so fun talking with you because you have this global perspective. If you're a CMO today, you mentioned Norm being analytical. You mentioned some of the creative leaders you work with,
yes,
brilliant in long-term brand building. But what are the 3 or 4 skills, attributes, behaviors that a great marketing leader needs to have now or be developing to survive and thrive in the next 5 years?
Okay, so well, they've got to have the strategic chops. They've got to have the creative chops that you referred to when you were talking about, the Saatchis brothers or David Ogilvy or whoever it happens to be. But they've got to have, a couple of other things, a few other things. Firstly, they've got to have deep, I think, cultural sensitivities or knowledge. I would put it, when people say, what should young people do? I would say, learn Chinese or Spanish. And the reason I say that's still important is you get a deep understanding, and the world is changing. I mean, whether America likes it or not, and probably the answer is not in general, it's a G2 world. And the economic power is shifting to the global south. So you're going to have deep cultural sensitivities. You've got to have a deep understanding of the importance and power of data, first-party data, and the signals from your platforms and from others. And you've got to have a deep understanding of technology. So the balance, whereas before strategic and creative were critically important, I would add to that this sort of cultural sensitivity, if that's the right way of putting it.
All those things make sense. Let me just ask about you personally.
Yeah.
You have lived through, experienced, led these epochs and eras of marketing and transformation, and you're leading into the next one, this current one. How do you follow technology? Is it just finding the right people to speak to? Is there, I mean, you mentioned this Goldman call, which sounds kind of fascinating. I don't know whether you need to be a CFO to understand it, but how are you staying abreast of all this unbelievable change?
I think you have to absorb as much as you possibly can, Josh, from all sources. I mean, you've got to talk to people, fill your day. You know, when you get up in the morning, fill your mind with the news. The answer is continuously absorb, but the difference now is I absorb much more visually and I absorb much more verbally. So talking to as many people as you possibly can, you know, filling your day with interactions and different points of view is critically important. And looking at sources that you might even be sort of disturbed by, or politically or socially you might not have thought of doing it. So being willing to absorb it from all different angles. I mean, at the heart of what we do, what's interesting about the ad business still, despite all the challenges, what really makes it fascinating is you are at the center of all these geographical and technological changes. In the course of a day, and you know, we're not a huge company, billion-dollar company with 6,500 people in 33, 34 countries, but you see in the course of a day or a week or a month or a year or whatever, all the forces that are playing out both geographically and technologically. When I started at Saatchis, it was about Manhattan Landing and the British Airways commercials and Maggie Thatcher. You saw how advertising influenced industry and politics and primarily geography. With WPP, it was a continuation of Ted Levitt's globalization article in, what was it, 83, I think it was, 1983 in the Harvard Business Review. But then with the internet in particular, in the 90s, the late 90s in particular, the impact of technology. And then you saw the rise of Alphabet, the rise of Meta, the rise of Amazon, the rise of NVIDIA. I mean, it's incredible that our industry, for all its vicissitudes and all its peculiarities, all its lack of measurability and intangibility, is at the center, if not at the center, is certainly an observer of all the things that I'm talking about. I mean, it's incredible. So we get exposed to these things. And when we work with companies like your own, when we see Alphabet in anywhere in the world, or indeed a Meta or an Amazon, or in China, an Alibaba, or Tencent, or ByteDance, you get exposed. So when you say to me, how do you keep up? I mean, it's by virtue of the fact of the people that we deal, the clients we deal with, the media owners that we deal with, both old and new. So we're at the epicenter of all things geographic and technological. The next 5 years will be the most interesting, but it will also be the most challenging, because I think the pressures, those geographic and technological pressures that I referred to, are huge. And come back to what we talked about pretty much at the beginning. This volatility, this change, you know, this is trite. The pace of change is huge, Josh. You know, I can remember stopping, I'm old enough to remember stopping, going up the motorway to Manchester to get out to a phone box and press button A and button B and put in pennies, you know, in order to get was it 4 pennies or whatever it was to get a phone call. Life is it. So the pressures, it's all been compressed. And I do fundamentally believe that the model has changed. I do think that it's a much more performance, activation, mid-funnel, lower funnel model. I mean, just one story. The CMO, I won't say which company, a company, global company, the CEO, it was a new CEO, and this new CEO walks into the CMO and says, why are we doing all this upper funnel stuff around, sponsorship and events and all this stuff? He said, I have to stand up with analysts every quarter and talk what about our organic growth rate is and what our margins are.
I agree with that. And yet I also see the capacity of that technological innovation, of the AI creating millions of different assets, that we can create more resonant, engaging, and fun stuff. I think the best marketing is yet to come because there is more creativity, more opportunity. And yes, I understand on the business side, it's going to be messy as heck, but I'm still excited.
So you just reminded me, when I was at WPP, I think with Miles Young, actually, we saw the principle of Mextech, and he explained to me how the internet, Mexican villages didn't have libraries. And the internet came along, and all of a sudden, Mexican kids got access to libraries. Now, so the accessibility that the internet came to large swathes of the population that had the marginal cost of information, zero. Same thing is true for what we're going through now, particularly with AI, with LLMs. I mean, look at the access to knowledge instantly that you have, combined with hallucinations or whatever it is, but look at the access you get. So nothing but good comes out of that, and opening up to all the population, to all those people that didn't have access, that didn't have private education, that didn't get the best of public education, or didn't get any, like my parents, right? My parents left school at 13, and my mother and father, and their parents before them came to the UK in 1899 from the Ukraine, not speaking a word of English. I get all that, but I do think that it is going to be increasingly pressurized and increasingly short term.
So Martin, incredible technology, incredible AI, incredible agency in S4. What is the exciting part of being a marketer today and being a CMO today for you?
I think you're at the center of everything going on in the world, in society, in the country in which you live, in the continent in which you live, in the world that we live. You're witnessing huge changes politically, so great fragmentation. So you have to sort out in your own minds where's the best place for you to build your operations and grow your operations. So that's one thing. Secondly, technology is changing the timeframes continuously, compressing the timeframes, and therefore applying technology, whether it be around smartphones and the internet historically, or now around AI and quantum and blockchain. So I think that also is an era which is tremendously interesting and challenging, because people, I think it's a challenge when people can do work in a distributed fashion. I think, 3 days in the office, my own view is that's probably made things more difficult, less interaction. And a lot of people say that being out of the office reduces human contact and creative frictions that solve problems or address problems. A lot of the work that the D3 Institute was doing, really interesting, actually. One of the biggest problems about being out of the office is young people, entrants to the business, don't understand the company and don't understand the culture. Now, they've done a lot of research into the use of AI agents to train people remotely in a distributed fashion about the nature of the company, the nature of the culture, the people, etc. And this work has shown that you can develop extremely effective systems using AI to train people and induct people into companies. Now, if that is so, and if that is effective, I had doubts about it, but if that's effective, that means distributed working is going to become even more effective with AI. And you can envisage things being done visually, virtually, that will enable people to do that in an even more effective way, which will make everything even more fluid, than it is already. And I'm already uncomfortable about the fluidity that we see.
I'm going to ask you a couple of just casual rapid fire questions. What's an unforgivable piece of bullshit you hear from marketing clients right now?
I'm going to implement AI. I'm going to implement AI totally. Let me put it like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is something that agencies still have to do because clients are either too nice or polite or chicken to say, just stop doing that?
Giving away stuff for free. We give away so much for free. And, you know, we've, as I said before, we've got to move to an output-based model, increasingly because of the nature of AI and the impact of AI. But agencies are too accommodating. McKinsey is not accommodating, Goldman is not accommodating, and they're extremely well-run professional service firms. Agencies are not well-run. We hate to ask clients for money.
And yet you do regularly. What's one of your favorite ads, campaigns that you've worked on? What do you love from this industry?
If I went back in time, and it's a bit invidious, I think Manhattan Landing, the BA Manhattan Landing campaign at Saatchis is still the pregnant man, the Israel citrus board. Those were three of the. I still reminisce about those three ads that were done by Saatchis at the very beginning.
I'm going to get those links and put them in the show notes so that people can see those. I guess I should ask you this one, but I'm worried to do so. But what do you find ridiculous about the major legacy holding companies today?
They still don't understand there's overcapacity. I mean, really what's going on, the Ogilvy merger or the Omnicom IPG merger is really about overcapacity. Overcapacity in the traditional market, not overcapacity in the digital market. And I don't think that people in the holding companies accept that. I mean, the agency business is going to go through, it's just the beginning of huge transformation. And Omnicom, you still have issues around Dentsu International, issues around WPP. So there's still a lot more to go. And I think people running the holding companies don't accept that.
I'm going to ask one final question. Which market anywhere in the world do you think is one that we as marketers, we should be looking at for the creativity, the momentum, just the interesting things happening?
Argentina. There is something about Buenos Aires, and I think it has to do with football. I think the Boca River Plate contest creates a creative tension there. See a little bit in Spain, but maybe less so. But I think the creative talent there is extraordinary, and also the technological talent is extraordinary, and it is a remarkable place. And long live Malay. I hope he gets it right.
So Martin Sorrell picks Argentina as the next advertising hotspot. I love it. So Martin, thank you so much for being here today. I've loved this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'm sure you'll build a very effective series.
Before we wrap, I want to leave you with 3 takeaways. Here are your field notes from the frontier. First, leap before you get pushed by your CFO and AI. So Martin argued that enterprise AI adoption is mostly stalled in a cycle of tinkering and workshops. The shift to AI at scale is not driven by a desire for innovation, but by existential economic pressure, as is happening in the auto category. Transformation happens when the economic screw tightens. For CMOs, the mandate is clear. Use AI to aggressively reduce your create costs. If you don't lead this efficiency drive, your CFO will. Second, the end of the slow brand era. So Martin drew a sharp line between the romantic Mad Men era and our modern reality now, explicitly challenging the luxury of slow brand building, noting that production cycles have collapsed from 200 days to 12. Speed is no longer just a competitive advantage, it's the baseline for survival. As Sir Martin implies, we aren't just speeding up the old model, we are building a new one, where slow is synonymous with obsolete. Sprinting isn't an option, it's the job. Third, the new CMO is a cultural and technical polymath. The traditional Mad Men balance of strategy and creativity is no longer the ceiling, it's the floor. So Martin defines the new CMO archetype as one rooted in geographic literacy and technical depth. As such, CMOs need to have deep cultural sensitivities. Furthermore, the best marketers now understand the data and code behind the creative. The Frontier CMO's role is shifting from managing teams of planners to managing systems that personalize content at scale, potentially millions of individual assets for a single campaign. The final thought: marketing is no longer just about selling things. It sits at the absolute center of global volatility, geopolitics, technology, and macroeconomics. That makes this role more difficult than ever, but also makes it the most interesting seat at the table. Thank you for listening. For the research and tools mentioned today, head on over to thinkwithgoogle.com. We'll be back next episode with another leader building the future while the rest of the industry watches. Until then, stay sharp and stay out in front.